The council chamber stretched wide and tall, built to accommodate dozens of different alien species. Zerathil stood at her podium, her forearms crossed in a gesture that her people used to show polite disagreement. Her crystalline skin caught the light from the ceiling, sending small rainbows across the marble floor. She watched the human delegation present their case at the center platform. Lieutenant Jake Morrison stood in his crisp military uniform, his shoulders back and his voice steady. Next to him, Commander Amy Patterson held a data tablet, ready to display whatever evidence the council might request. "Honorable council members," Jake said, his voice carrying across the massive room. "Humanity requests consideration for a position on the Military Defense Committee. We have proven our capability in numerous conflicts. Our soldiers are well-trained, dedicated, and effective." Zerathil felt a small laugh bubble up in her chest. She kept it quiet, but several nearby delegates noticed and glanced her way. The human continued speaking, apparently unaware of her amusement. "Human warriors have a long history," Jake continued. "Our ancestors fought with simple weapons, yet they conquered entire continents. When outmatched, they adapted. When wounded, they fought harder. This tradition continues in our modern military forces." Amy activated the tablet, projecting images into the air above them. Battle scenes appeared, showing human soldiers in various historical periods. Ancient warriors with swords, medieval knights in armor, modern soldiers with advanced weapons. "We may not have natural armor like the Korthan," Jake said, gesturing to one of the massive, shell-covered delegates. "We lack the regenerative abilities of the Thelnari." He nodded toward another section where the tentacled beings sat in pools of water. "But what we have is determination, endurance, the refusal to surrender even when logic says we should." That was when Zerathil could no longer contain herself. Her laugh rang out clear and sharp through the chamber. Several delegates turned to stare at her. The human delegation stopped speaking. "Forgive me," Zerathil said, though her tone carried no real apology. She stepped forward from her podium. "But I must speak. The council deserves truth, not romantic stories." The council chairman, a elderly Vexkari like herself, tilted his head. "Ambassador Zerathil has the floor." She moved to the center, her forearms gesturing as she spoke. "I have reviewed humanity's military records extensively. Yes, they fight. Yes, they have won battles. But let us examine the facts without emotion." She waved one hand, and her own data appeared in the air. Humans lack any significant biological advantages. Their bones break easily. Their skin tears. They have no natural weapons. One major injury, and they become combat ineffective. Jake opened his mouth to respond, but Zerathil continued. "My people, the Vexkari, can shut down our pain receptors at will. We have redundant organs. If one heart fails, another takes over. We are built for warfare." She turned to face the Korthan delegate. "Your people have natural armor that can stop most small arms fire. The Thelnari can regenerate limbs in days." She looked back at the human delegation. "What do humans have? Stories, myths, legends of warriors who supposedly fought beyond their limits." Her voice took on a mocking edge. "But myths are not military doctrine. Determination does not stop bleeding. Courage does not heal broken bones." Amy Patterson stepped forward, her jaw tight. "Ambassador, with respect, you're oversimplifying our capabilities. Human psychology is a weapon in itself. Our soldiers fight not just for victory, but for each other. That bond creates a force multiplier that statistics cannot measure. Psychology?" Zerathil laughed again. "You cannot defeat an enemy with feelings. This is war we discuss, not poetry." She turned to address the full council. "Active re. I propose that humanity's petition be denied. They are too fragile, too limited by their biology. Placing them on the Military Defense Committee would be irresponsible. They would become casualties that the rest of us would need to protect." The Thelnari delegate rippled in what might have been agreement. The Korthon remained silent, but did not object. Other species around the chamber murmured among themselves. Jake Morrison's face remained calm, but his hands had formed fists at his sides. Kyle Sanders, the human security officer, standing at the back, looked like he wanted to say something, but held his position. I have personally witnessed combat, Zerathil continued. I know what real warriors look like. They are beings who can sustain damage and continue functioning. They are creatures built for survival. Humans are soft, brief-lived beings playing at war. They tell themselves stories about ancient warriors to feel brave. But stories do not win battles. The council chairman raised one hand. The council will vote on humanity's petition. He looked at the assembled delegates. Those in favor? 2. Those. About 1/3 of the delegates raised their hands or equivalent appendages. Zerathil noted with satisfaction that most of the military-focused species abstained or voted against. Those opposed? More hands rose. The vote was clear. The petition is denied, the chairman announced. Humanity will not be granted a seat on the Military Defense Committee at this time. Amy Patterson's shoulders sagged slightly. Jake Morrison gave a crisp nod, keeping his dignity intact. Thank you for your consideration, he said quietly, then turned and walked out with his delegation. After the session ended, Zerathil returned to her private quarters. Her aide, a younger Vexkari named Telmar, was waiting with reports. The humans seemed disappointed, Telmar observed. Of course they were, Zerathil replied, settling into her chair. But disappointment is a teacher. Perhaps this will help them understand their limitations. She pulled up a star chart on her screen. I have been reassigned. Reassigned? The council chairman believes I should spend time observing the border colonies. He says it will give me perspective on defensive operations. She made a dismissive gesture with 2 of her arms. It is punishment for being too blunt during the hearing, though he will not say so directly. Telmar hesitated. The border regions. Those are near the Kravik territories. The Kravik have been quiet for years, Zerathil said. This is a safe assignment disguised as an important one. I will spend a few months watching various species guard empty space, then return to proper diplomatic work. She closed the star chart and pulled up the human files again. The images of their warriors appeared once more. Ancient soldiers with primitive weapons. Modern troops with advanced gear. All of them looked so vulnerable to her trained eye. No armor plating. No redundant organs. No enhanced healing. Soft, brief-lived creatures, she murmured to herself, playing at war. Within 3 weeks, she would arrive at Haven's Rest. Within 4 weeks, she would discover exactly how wrong she had been. But in that moment, comfortable in her quarters, surrounded by her certainties, Zerathil had no doubt about her assessment of human warriors. They were myths, nothing more. The colony of Haven's Rest looked peaceful from the shuttle window. Zerathil could see the settlement spreading across a green valley, with farms and residential buildings arranged in neat patterns. A small military outpost sat on the ridge overlooking the colony, its walls and towers designed more for show than serious defense. Captain Ryan Beck met her at the landing pad. He was a tall human with sun-weathered skin and tired eyes. Ambassador Zerathil, welcome to Haven's Rest. I'm sorry the accommodations won't be as luxurious as you're used to. This is an observation assignment, she replied coolly. I require only basic facilities and access to your defensive systems data. Ryan nodded and gestured toward the main building. We can set that up for you. Though honestly, there's not much to observe out here. Quiet sector, friendly neighbors, no major threats. As if the universe wanted to mock those words, an alarm began to wail across the outpost. Ryan's casual demeanor vanished instantly. He touched his ear, where a communication device sat. Say again? His face went pale. All of them? How many ships? Doc. Zerathil felt her skin prickle with alarm. What is happening? Kravik, Ryan said, already running toward the command center. Multiple invasion forces, hitting colonies across the border. We're one of the targets. She followed him inside, where screens showed a terrifying picture. Dozens of Kravik ships were dropping into the system, and smaller craft were already descending toward the planet. The Kravik were insectoid creatures, each one standing over 2 meters tall with sharp claws and acidic venom. Worse, they fought in swarms, overwhelming defenses with pure numbers. Lieutenant Claire Rodriguez stood at the main console, her fingers flying across controls. Sir, initial estimates put their landing force at over 10,000. We have 200 soldiers and 5,000 colonists. Start evacuation procedures, Ryan ordered. Get the civilians to the shelters. Send a distress call to the fleet. Already done, sir, Claire said. Fleet response time is estimated at 72 hours minimum. 72 hours. Zarathiel's mind raced through tactical calculations. The Vexkari military doctrine was clear. When facing odds above 3-1, strategic withdrawal was the only logical choice. The humans were facing 50-1 odds. Captain Beck, she said formally, I recommend immediate evacuation. You cannot hold against those numbers. We must leave the planet before they establish orbital control. Ryan looked at her, and something in his expression made her pause. It was not fear. It was not even surprise. It was determination, mixed with something that looked almost like anger. Ambassador, I have 5,000 people down in that colony. Families, children, old folks who've lived here for 30 years. I'm not abandoning them. Khan, you cannot save them if you die, Zarathiel insisted. Logic demands retreat. Then I guess we're not very logical, Ryan said. He turned to his staff. Battle stations. I want every defensive position manned. Get Sergeant Lisa Chen to set up field hospitals. Tell Private Alex Turner to get his squad to the outer perimeter. Zarathiel watched in disbelief as the humans rushed to prepare for a battle they could not win. No evacuation shuttles were being prepared. No retreat was being organized. They were actually going to fight. The first Kravik drop pods hit the ground 20 minutes later. They came down like meteors, slamming into the fields outside the colony. The pods opened, and Kravik warriors poured out, their mandibles clicking and their claws gleaming. Alex Turner was a young soldier, barely 20 years old by Zarathiel's estimation. She watched through the command center cameras as his squad took position behind defensive barriers. The Kravik rushed forward in their characteristic swarm attack, hundreds of them moving as one mass. Fire! Alex's voice came through the radio. And the human weapons opened up. The sound was deafening even through the speakers. Kravik fell. But more kept coming. Always more. Zarathiel saw a Kravik warrior break through the defensive line. Its blade-like arm swung at Alex, and she watched the young human try to dodge. Too slow. The blade caught him in the shoulder, cutting deep through his armor and into muscle and bone. Man down, someone shouted. Zarathiel expected Alex to fall. That was a serious wound. One that would incapacitate any soldier. She had seen similar injuries in battle, and they always ended the same way. The wounded fighter collapsed, went into shock, became a casualty that others had to carry. But Alex did not fall. He staggered, his left arm now useless and hanging at his side. Blood poured from the wound. Then Sergeant Lisa Chen was there. A combat medic with quick hands and steady nerves. She pulled out a spray canister and covered the wound with foam that hardened almost instantly, sealing the injury. "Can you fight?" Lisa asked. Alex picked up his rifle with his right hand. His face was pale with pain, but his jaw was set. "Yeah, I can fight," and he did. Zarathiel watched in growing confusion as the young human continued to fire his weapon, moving with his squad, fighting as if his left shoulder was not torn open. The combat gel would stop the bleeding, but it would not stop the pain. It would not repair the damage. Yet, he kept fighting. The battle raged for 6 hours. 6 hours of continuous combat against an enemy that never seemed to run out of warriors. The humans held their outer defensive positions through sheer firepower and coordination. When one soldier fell wounded, another took their position. When ammunition ran low in one sector, runners brought more. Zerathil stood in the command center, watching screens and recording everything with her neural implants. This made no sense. By all military logic, the humans should have broken by now. They were outnumbered, outmatched, taking casualties. Yet they held. Ryan Beck moved through the outpost, checking positions and encouraging his troops. He had been awake for over 30 hours, but he showed no signs of stopping. When a section of wall was damaged by Kravic acid weapons, he was there helping to shore up the defenses. When ammunition needed to be distributed, he carried boxes himself. "Captain," Claire Rodriguez called out, "the eastern perimeter is being overrun. They're recommending fallback to secondary positions." "Approved," Ryan said immediately. "Execute fighting retreat. Everyone falls back in order. No one gets left behind." The evacuation of the outer positions was organized chaos. Soldiers fell back, while others provided covering fire. The wounded were carried by their comrades. And always, the Kravic kept coming. Alex Turner stumbled into the command center with his squad, his face gray with blood loss. Lisa Chen immediately started working on him again, giving him an injection that Zerathil recognized as a stimulant, dangerous to use, as it pushed the body beyond its safe limits. "How bad is it out there?" Ryan asked. "Bad, sir," Alex replied, his voice hoarse. "But we made them pay for every meter. They won't forget the outer perimeter anytime soon." Ryan gripped the young soldier's good shoulder. "You did well. Rest if you can." "With respect, sir." "I'll rest when they're dead. Or we are." Zerathil could not help herself. She approached the young human. "You should be in medical. That wound is serious." Alex looked at her with eyes that seemed much older than his face. "Ambassador, with respect, we don't have the luxury of staying in medical. They need every gun on the line." He checked his rifle and headed back toward the defensive positions. As the human soldiers prepared for the next assault, Zerathil found herself questioning everything she had said in the council chamber. These were not warriors playing at war. These were not soft creatures telling themselves myths. These were humans doing what humans apparently did best. They were bleeding, hurting, dying, and they kept fighting anyway. 18 hours had passed since the invasion began. Zerathil had not slept, though exhaustion was becoming a real problem. The humans, somehow, kept functioning despite being awake even longer than she had. The outpost was barely recognizable now. Walls were scorched black from Kravic acid. Bodies of the insectoid warriors lay in heaps where human defensive fire had cut them down. But for every Kravic that fell, it seemed like 2 more appeared to take its place. The human forces had been reduced to 89 soldiers still capable of fighting. Many of them were wounded, but refused to leave the line. Lisa Chen moved between defensive positions like a ghost, treating wounds and administering stimulants to keep people conscious and functional. Zerathil had been checking defensive sensor data when the explosion happened. A Kravic acid grenade had breached one of the exterior walls, and the blast sent shrapnel everywhere. She felt something hot slash across her side, and looked down to see her crystalline skin cracked and leaking the fluid that served as her blood. Pain flooded through her nervous system. Real pain. Sharp and burning. She activated her species' natural pain, suppression, and immediately, the sensation faded to a dull ache. Her people's biological advantage, the thing that made them superior warriors. She could turn off pain and keep fighting. Lisa Chen appeared at her side within moments. "Let me see that. I have suppressed the pain," Zerathil said, trying to sound calm. I can continue functioning. Lisa worked quickly, applying bandages designed for non-human physiology. Pain suppression is useful, but you still need treatment. That wound could get infected. GBH, Team U. GBH, Zarathil watched the medic work. Your people do not have pain suppression. How do you continue fighting when wounded? Zarathil watched the medic. Zarathil watched the medic. One wounded. Zarathil watched the medic. Lisa looked up at her, and there was something fierce in her eyes. We use the pain. It reminds us we're still alive. It keeps us sharp, keeps us focused. Turn off your pain and you might not notice when something gets worse. The concept was foreign to Zarathil. Using pain as a tool? Her people had evolved past such primitive responses. Or so she had believed. Ryan Beck's voice crackled over the communication system. All units. Be advised. We have heavy Kravik movement on the southern approach. Looks like they're preparing for a major push. Zarathil made her way back to the command center, moving carefully around her injury. When she arrived, she saw something that made her stop, in shock. Ryan Beck was standing at the command console, but he should not have been standing at all. A Kravik warrior had broken through during the last attack, and its spine-like projectile had struck him in the abdomen. She had seen the wound herself. The spine had gone completely through his body, perforating organs and causing massive internal bleeding. Lisa Chen had removed the spine and sealed the wound, but by all Vex-Carry medical knowledge, this injury should have been fatal. At minimum, it should have rendered Ryan completely incapacitated. Shock alone should have shut down his higher functions. Yet here he stood, pale and sweating but coordinating defensive strategies. His hands moved across the tactical display, marking enemy positions and directing his remaining troops. Captain Beck, Zarathil said carefully. You should be in surgery. That wound will kill you. He glanced at her, and she saw pain in his eyes, real pain that he was not suppressing or ignoring. He was feeling every bit of it and functioning anyway. Maybe it will, he said quietly. But not in the next few hours. And that's all that matters right now. My people need to see their commander standing. They need to know I'm still here with them. This is illogical, she protested. You are damaging yourself further. You are reducing your survival chances. Logic isn't everything, Ambassador. He turned back to the display. Sometimes you just have to hold the line. No matter what. A massive explosion rocked the outpost. Private Megan Walker had been setting defensive charges on the southern wall when it collapsed. Zarathil watched through the security cameras as the young woman disappeared under tons of rubble. Megan! Someone shouted over the radio. They pulled her out 3 minutes later. Both of her legs were crushed, broken in multiple places. She should have been screaming. She should have been going into shock. Instead, she looked at her communicator and said through gritted teeth, "The charges are still active. I can remote detonate when they come through." She was given a handheld detonator, and from a stretcher in the medical bay, she watched camera feeds and triggered explosives as Kravik warriors tried to breach the southern wall. Every explosion was perfectly timed. Every detonation took maximum toll on the enemy. On the eastern tower, Corporal Ben Harris took shrapnel to the face when a Kravik weapon exploded nearby. His left eye was destroyed, blood streaming down his face. Lisa Chen reached him, cleaned the wound, and applied a pressure bandage. "Can you still shoot?" she asked him. Ben adjusted his rifle, looking through the scope with his remaining eye. "Yeah, I can still shoot," and he did. For the next 4 hours, he continued counter-sniping Kravik spotters, taking them down one by one with his single working eye. Zarathil recorded everything with her neural implants. Every impossible moment. Every human who should have fallen, but kept fighting. She was trying to understand, trying to make sense of what she was witnessing. At hour 24, she approached Ryan Beck again. He was still standing at the command console, though now he had one hand pressed against his abdomen. Blood was seeping through his uniform despite Lisa's field surgery. "Captain Beck," she said, "I must know. Why do you not fall? Your body should have failed hours ago. By every medical standard I know, you should be unconscious or dead." He looked at her with eyes that held terrible pain and absolute determination. "Because if I fall, they fall. If I give up, they give up. We don't have reinforcements coming in the next day. We don't have superior weapons or armor. What we have is each other, and the refusal to let each other down. But the cost," Zarathil said. "You are destroying your body. You may never fully recover." "Maybe not," Ryan agreed. "But those 5,000 colonists down there, they'll live. Those civilians who trusted us to protect them, they'll see another day. That's worth the cost. That's always worth the cost." A message came through from the fleet. Claire Rodriguez read it aloud, her voice shaking. "Relief forces are still 40 hours away. They're coming as fast as they can, but there are multiple simultaneous attacks across the border. They're spread thin. 40 more hours." Zarathil did the calculations. The humans had perhaps 24 hours of ammunition remaining at current consumption rates. They were down to fewer than 90 fighters. The Kravik showed no signs of stopping their assault. The math was simple and brutal. The humans could not hold that long. Ryan Beck heard the same numbers, made the same calculations. She saw it in his face. He knew what was coming. They all did. "Understood," he said calmly. "All units, conserve ammunition. Controlled bursts only. Make every shot count." Zarathil looked around the command center at these impossible humans. At Ryan Beck, standing with a fatal wound. At the screens showing soldiers with broken bones and torn flesh still manning their positions. At the determination in every face. She had laughed at their myths. She had called them soft creatures playing at war. She had believed that real warriors needed biological advantages, redundant organs, pain suppression. She had been wrong about everything. "Captain," she said quietly, "I owe your people an apology. I owe you more than I can express." He looked at her and managed a small, pained smile. "If we survive this," Zarathil thought. But she kept that to herself and moved to help where she could. If these humans could fight through impossible pain, the least she could do was stand with them. At hour 36, the situation had become desperate. The humans had been forced back to their final defensive position around the evacuation shuttles. 2,000 colonists remained, huddled in the landing area, while their protectors fought off wave after wave of Kravik warriors. 34 soldiers remained combat effective, and every single one of them carried wounds that would have put any other species in intensive care. Zarathil had stopped trying to understand how they were still functioning. She simply accepted it as a fact, however impossible it seemed. Ryan Beck finally collapsed at hour 37. His body simply could not continue. No matter how strong his will, he fell while coordinating the Western defensive line, dropping to his knees as blood loss and organ failure finally caught up with him. Lisa Chen was there immediately, along with 2 others who carried him to a medical stretcher. Zarathil expected them to sedate him, to let him rest. Instead, Lisa administered another stimulant and kept him conscious. "I need you awake, Captain," she said firmly. Ryan's eyes opened, though they were clouded with pain and exhaustion. "Report," he managed to say. Lieutenant Nicole Grant crouched beside the stretcher. She was a lean woman, with short dark hair and eyes that had not slept in 2 days. "Sir, we've consolidated at the landing zone. All civilians are in the shuttles and ready to evacuate. We're holding the perimeter, but ammunition is critical. Maybe 6 hours left at current rate. Relief forces? Still 4 hours out, sir." Ryan tried to sit up, but his body would not cooperate. Zarathil watched him struggle. Saw the frustration in his face. He had led his people this far, and now his body was betraying him at the final moment. "Nicole," he said, his voice rough. You have command. Get those civilians off this planet. Yes, sir. She stood, then hesitated. Captain, it's been an honor. It's not over yet, Lieutenant. We're not done. Nicole moved back to the command position, taking over coordination. Zerathil noticed that the other soldiers seemed to fight even harder, knowing their captain was watching from his stretcher. They would not let him down. Not now. She had moved to help Lisa Chen with medical duties when something happened that would haunt her for the rest of her life. A soldier named Kyle Patterson took a direct hit from Kravik venom. The acidic substance ate through his armor and into his chest, destroying lung tissue and stopping his heart. Zerathil watched the monitors as his vital signs flatlined. 47 seconds, with no heartbeat. By any medical definition, he was dead. Lisa Chen grabbed a defibrillator and shocked his chest. Once. Twice. 3 times. Come on, Kyle. Not yet. Not today. On the 4th shock, his heart restarted. He gasped, his body convulsing as life returned. Zerathil stood frozen, her medical training screaming that this was impossible. Humans did not survive that long without oxygen to their brain. They did not come back from clinical death in the middle of a battlefield. But Kyle did. 2 minutes later, after Lisa had stabilized him and treated the acid burns, he picked up his rifle. Kyle, you died, Zerathil said, her voice shaking. I recorded your death. Your heart stopped for 47 seconds. How are you fighting? He looked at her with eyes that had seen the other side and come back. Because they need me, Ambassador. That's all the reason I need. He walked back to his position on the defensive line, moving stiffly but steadily. Zerathil stood there, trying to process what she had witnessed. This went beyond endurance. Beyond pain, tolerance. This was something else entirely. At hour 39, the Kravik launched their largest assault yet. Thousands of them rushed the landing zone from all sides, determined to overwhelm the defenders through sheer numbers. It was do or die for both sides. The human defensive fire was devastating. Every bullet counted. Every shot was placed with precision born of desperation. But there were too many Kravik and too few humans. Shuttles 1 through 4, launch now, Nicole Grant ordered. Get those civilians out of here. 4 shuttles lifted off, their engines screaming as they punched through the atmosphere. That left 2 shuttles and 1,000 colonists still on the ground. Western perimeter is breaking, someone shouted over the radio. Sergeant Matt Price was on the western perimeter. Zerathil had been monitoring his status. He had a sucking chest wound, a condition where his lung was punctured and air was escaping into his chest cavity. Every breath was agony. Every movement made it worse. All Western units, fall back to secondary positions, Nicole ordered. Matt's voice came back, calm and steady. Negative. If we fall back now, they'll be through and onto the shuttles in minutes. We need to buy more time. Matt, that's suicide, Nicole said. Then it's suicide. But it'll work. There was a pause. Tell the captain we held the line. Zerathil watched through the cameras as Matt Price and 6 other soldiers charged directly into the Kravik swarm. They fired as they ran, throwing grenades and emptying their weapons into the enemy mass. It was not a military tactic. It was not strategic. It was 7 humans buying time with their lives. They lasted 3 minutes. 3 minutes of savage close combat that disrupted the Kravik assault and gave the defenders time to reinforce other positions. When it was over, none of the 7 were moving. Shuttles 5 and 6, launch. Nicole ordered quietly. All remaining personnel, fall back to Shuttle 7. 12 soldiers remained. 12 humans, all wounded, all exhausted, all running on nothing but determination and spite. They formed a final defensive line around the last shuttle. Ryan Beck's voice came from his stretcher, barely audible. Nicole, get on that shuttle. Get everyone out. Not without you, sir. That's an order, Lieutenant. With respect, sir, I don't take orders from people on stretchers. We're all leaving together, or none of us are. The final Kravik assault came like a wave of kitten and claws. The 12 soldiers fired until their weapons clicked empty, then drew sidearms. When those ran dry, they used knives. When they could not stand, they fought from their knees. Zerathil found herself at Ryan Beck's stretcher. I am taking you to the shuttle, she said. Do not argue. He tried to protest, but she lifted him with her forearms. She was stronger than she looked, and he was too weak to resist. The other soldiers covered their retreat, falling back step by step toward the shuttle ramp. Everyone in, Nicole shouted. Move, move, move. They scrambled aboard, carrying their wounded. The shuttle pilot engaged engines the moment the ramp started closing. Kravik warriors were right behind them, climbing onto the hull. As the craft lifted off, the shuttle shook as it rose, and Zerathil looked out the window at the landing zone below. She could see 12 human soldiers there, the ones who had stayed behind to ensure the shuttle could launch. Nicole Grant was not among them, having made it aboard at the last second. The 12 remaining soldiers formed a circle, back to back, still fighting as the Kravik swarmed over their position. They were buying seconds now. Just seconds. But those seconds mattered. Nicole Grant's voice came over the radio, transmitting to the shuttle and to any listening station. This is Lieutenant Nicole Grant of Haven's Rest Defense Force. Tell them we held the line. Tell them Haven's Rest didn't break. Tell them. The transmission cut off as the shuttle climbed beyond range. Zerathil looked around the shuttle at the survivors. Ryan Beck, on his stretcher, barely conscious. Kyle Patterson, who had died and come back. Lisa Chen, with her medical supplies nearly exhausted. Alex Turner, with his useless arm. Megan Walker, with her shattered legs. 37 humans had survived out of 200. But 5,000 colonists lived because of them. 5,000 people who would see their families again, who would have futures, who would remember the day humans refused to let them die. The shuttle joined the other evacuation craft in orbit, and within hours the human relief fleet arrived. By then, Haven's Rest was lost. The Kravik had taken the colony, but they had paid a terrible price for it. And across the galaxy, word was spreading of what had happened there. Word of 200 humans holding against 10,000 Kravik for 40 hours. Word of soldiers fighting with fatal wounds. Word of warriors who died and kept fighting. The myths, it turned out, had been true all along. 2 weeks after Haven's Rest fell, the Galactic Council convened an emergency session. Zerathil had requested this meeting personally, using every diplomatic connection she had to make it happen. Now she stood once again at the center platform. But this time, she felt no amusement, no certainty, only the weight of what she had witnessed. The council chamber was packed. Every species had sent representatives. Word of Haven's Rest had spread across known space, and everyone wanted to hear the truth of what had happened. The council chairman gave her the floor. Ambassador Zerathil, you have called this emergency session. Please, present your testimony. She took a deep breath and activated her neural recordings. Honorable council members, 2 weeks ago I stood in this chamber and laughed at humanity. I mocked their warriors and called their history myths. Today I stand before you to formally apologize for my ignorance and to present evidence that will change how we view human military capabilities. The air above the platform shimmered, and images began to play. Not edited propaganda, not carefully selected highlights, raw footage from her own memories, recorded through her neural implants during those 40 terrible hours. The council watched in silence as Alex Turner took a blade through his shoulder and kept fighting. They saw Ryan Beck coordinate defenses with a fatal wound in his abdomen. They witnessed Megan Walker triggering explosives from a stretcher with both legs crushed. They saw Ben Harris sniping with one eye. They watched Kyle Patterson die and come back. Zerathil let the footage speak for itself. No narration was needed. The images told the story better than any words could. When the recordings ended, The silence in the chamber was absolute. Even the Korthan delegates, who rarely showed emotion, seemed shaken. The Thelnari were completely still in their water pools. I laughed at the myths of human warriors, Zerathil said into that silence. I believed them to be exaggerations, primitive boasting meant to compensate for biological weakness. I was wrong. Catastrophically. Completely wrong. She pulled up medical data next, showing scans and analysis of the human soldiers during the battle. By every medical standard known to galactic science, these humans should not have been able to continue fighting. Captain Ryan Beck sustained injuries that would kill most species instantly and cause immediate unconsciousness in the rest. He commanded his forces for 17 more hours. More data appeared. Private Kyle Patterson was clinically dead for 47 seconds. In that time, brain damage should have been severe and permanent, yet he recovered and returned to combat immediately. This should be impossible. She showed wound reports on soldier after soldier. Broken bones, torn muscles, punctured organs, massive blood loss. Each one should have ended the fight for any rational being. But humans, she had learned, were not entirely rational. I have reviewed your species' military doctrines, she continued, addressing the full council. The Vex carry withdraw when odds exceed 3-1. The Korthan retreat when casualties reach 20%. The Thelnari disengage if regeneration rates cannot keep pace with damage. These are logical, reasonable, military standards. She paused, letting that sink in. Humans were facing 50-1 odds. They sustained 75% casualties. Their medical supplies were exhausted. Their ammunition was nearly gone. By every military doctrine in this chamber, they should have surrendered or retreated. But they did not, said the Thelnari delegate, its voice bubbling up from its pool. Why? Because they couldn't, Zerathil said simply. 5,000 civilians were counting on them. To retreat meant those people would die. And humans, I have learned, would rather die themselves than fail the people they have sworn to protect. She brought up the final piece of footage. The 12 soldiers forming their last stand as the shuttle lifted off. The council watched as these wounded, exhausted humans fought to their last breath, buying seconds for civilians to escape. Humans do not fight because they are strong, Zerathil said. They fight because they are stubborn. They do not win because they have superior biology. They win because they refuse to accept defeat. Pain does not stop them. Injuries do not stop them. Even death, apparently, does not stop them immediately. She turned to face the human delegation. Ryan Beck was there, standing in his dress uniform. He wore a support brace under his clothes, and his face showed the cost of Haven's rest. But he stood straight and proud. Next to him was Admiral Kate Morrison, his superior officer. Ambassador Claire Wright stood with them, representing human diplomatic interests. I owe humanity an apology, Zerathil said directly to them. I owe Captain Beck and his soldiers more than I can ever repay. They saved my life, while I was in the process of learning how wrong I had been about them. A Korthan council member spoke up, his deep voice rumbling. This testimony is impressive, Ambassador Zerathil. But surely these are exceptional examples. One cannot judge an entire species by their elite warriors. These were not elite warriors, Zerathil replied. I reviewed their records. Captain Beck was a standard infantry officer, assigned to a quiet sector. His soldiers were typical troops, many on their first combat deployment. Private Alex Turner had been in service for only 8 months. These were not special forces or enhanced soldiers. They were ordinary humans. The implications of that statement rippled through the chamber. If ordinary humans could perform such feats, what could their actual elite forces accomplish? The council chairman addressed Ryan Beck directly. Captain Beck, you have permission to speak. The council would hear from you directly. Ryan stepped forward, moving carefully. A Thelnari delegate asked, How did you continue functioning after sustaining what our medical analysis confirms was a fatal wound? Ryan considered his answer carefully. I didn't really think about it, to be honest. My people needed me. That's all that mattered. When you have folks counting on you, you find a way to keep going. It's not complicated. But the pain, the delegate pressed. The physical trauma. How did you override such strong biological imperatives to stop fighting? Pain tells you you're still alive, Ryan said, and Zerathil recognized Lisa Chen's words. It keeps you focused. As for biological imperatives, well, humans have a pretty strong imperative to protect our people. That overrides most other concerns. Another delegate asked, would you do it again? Knowing the cost, knowing you might have died, would you make the same choice? Yes, Ryan said without hesitation. Every time. 5,000 people lived because we held that line. That's not a hard choice. That's just the right choice. Zerathil stepped forward again. Honorable Council, I am here to make a formal proposal. Humanity should not merely join the Military Defense Committee, as they requested before. They should lead the training doctrine for all Council forces. They should teach us what they know about endurance warfare, about fighting beyond the point where logic says to stop. There was murmuring throughout the chamber. The proposal was bold, perhaps too bold. But Zerathil pressed on. We face threats like the Kravik. We face enemies who rely on overwhelming numbers and terror tactics. Traditional military doctrine says to retreat from such threats when odds are impossible. But humans have proven that impossible odds are not the same as unwinnable fights. Admiral Kate Morrison spoke up. The Council should understand that what happened at Haven's Rest is not unique to that battle. Human military history is full of such stands. Thermopylae, the Alamo, Bastogne. We have a saying, this far, no further. When we draw a line, we hold it. The vote was called. Zerathil watched as hands, tentacles, and various appendages rose across the chamber. The count was unanimous. Humanity would join the Military Defense Committee. They would provide training to Council forces. They would share their doctrine of endurance warfare. After the session, Zerathil found Ryan Beck in a quiet corridor. He was leaning against a wall, clearly in pain but too proud to show it in the council chamber. Captain Beck, she said softly. He looked at her and managed a slight smile. Ambassador. She performed the Vex-Carry gesture of deepest respect, touching all four of her hands to her chest and bowing her head. I will never forget what you and your soldiers did. You saved my life. More than that, you showed me what true warriors look like. We were just doing our job, he said. No, she said firmly. You were doing something far more than that. Your species has something that mine lacks, something that cannot be taught, or programmed, or biologically engineered. She struggled to find the right words. You have the ability to look at impossible situations and decide they are merely difficult. You see death approaching, and you decide that it can wait until you are finished with your duty. Ryan was quiet for a moment. Then he said, we have a saying. An old boxer said it once, and it stuck with us. It's not about how hard you hit. It's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. I understand now why your people tell stories of warriors, Zerathil said. You are not celebrating strength. You are celebrating the refusal to stop. The will that endures beyond all reason. That's it exactly, Ryan agreed. I will never laugh at human warriors again, she said. I will only hope to be worthy of fighting beside them. Over the following months, human military advisors deployed across Council space. They taught other species what seemed impossible to teach. They showed soldiers from 100 worlds that endurance was not just a human trait. It was a choice, a decision to keep going when everything said to stop. Zerathil requested assignment to work with the human training programs. She wanted to learn everything she could. She wanted to understand not just the tactics, but the mindset that allowed beings to transcend their biological limitations. She received one final message from Haven's Rest. A monument had been erected there, after the Kravik were driven off and the colony retaken. It listed the names of all who had fallen. At the top, carved in stone, was a simple inscription. They held the line. Zarathil visited that monument when it was completed. She stood before it with Ryan Beck, who had recovered enough to attend the dedication ceremony. Families of the fallen were there. Survivors, fellow soldiers. They did not weep. They stood proud, knowing their people had not died in vain. The myths were true, Zarathil said quietly. Ryan shook his head slightly. They were never myths. They were just Tuesday for humans. And that, Zarathil realized, was perhaps the most frightening and wonderful thing about humanity. What other species considered impossible feats of legendary warriors? Humans considered a normal workday. They did not see themselves as special or exceptional. They were just doing what humans did. They were holding the line, protecting their people, and refusing to stop until the job was done. Or they were dead. Sometimes both.